Okay, we're reading chapter 6, The Path of Butterflies. They woke covered by a blanket of yellow butterflies. Now, where were they right now? What just happened in the last chapter? Can you say it again, Bella? No, that was a few chapters ago. This is what happened last time, guys. She got a new name. She grabbed the eagle feathers, like Brandy mentioned. She's a warrior now, and she got a new name. Anybody remember what her new name is?
Sacred woman.
I don't remember either. Her name, it means leading Thunderbird woman. It is Ogi Mabinesikwe. Okay. They woke covered by a blanket of yellow butterflies. Thousands of wings had fluttered down on them by night, and as the sun rose and warmed the creatures, they skipped everywhere, across the sand, over the light waves. Hundreds fanned their wings on the damp bark of the canoes, on the packs. They clung to their cooking pots, flitted around the baskets, and the blankets were covered with bright golden wings. The butterflies had black smudges on their wings that looked like staring eyes, and their wings were edged in soft black too. With every movement the family made, the butterflies swirled up in a dance of light. Omakias almost hated to leave them. Bijins put his hands up in wonder and waved his fingers. The butterfly landed on his hair, his arms, his little hands, even the tip of his tiny nose. Bijins tried to catch and eat the butterflies at first, yum yum, but at last he gave up and batted at their wings in play. The butterflies poured off Day-Day's feathers as he worked to load the canoes. "This is a good sign from the great kind spirit who loves us all," said Nokomis. "This is like a smile from the Creator, my children." And that the truth was, everyone was smiling, even Quill, even old Tallow. Who could help smiling when visited by these beautiful and fragile spirits? Only the dogs belonging to old Tallow took little notice. As the family pushed out onto the water to cross the lake, a brilliant cloud of yellow wings followed them a short way, then disappeared like a soft goodbye. You guys see Bijins there with his the butterfly on his nose? Emma, can you sit up, please, and follow along? As they crossed the lake, paddling, their spirits lifted. The way was long, but they would find their family in the end. The family sang together, back and forth between the canoes. They sang traveling songs, surprise songs, nonsense songs, even a love song from Day-Day to Mama, who laughed and flicked water backward at him from her paddle. Bijins loved the surprise of the canoe and put his hands on the gunwales and his face into the wind. He laughed with happiness, and Omakias laughed with him and kissed him. Once, looking up at Miss Gobines, she saw the old man smiling to see how much she loved her little brother. Paddling behind his father, Anna Meekins was smiling at her too, and she looked quickly down and hid her face in her baby brother's hair. Bijins pulled at her braids, and she made a quiet game of counting his fingers to keep him from throwing the canoe off balance. That was her job, amusing lively Bijins. The lake was big, Randy. It was big and shallow and sandy for a long way out, then deep and calm. The sun was much higher by the time they could see the other shore, but as land came into view, they could all see that something was happening in the sky. You guys get that picture in your mind? They're coming to shore and they see something in the sky as they come in. Their paddles dipped more slowly, then stopped, for the sky ahead was turning gray, color that had nothing to do with clouds or the weather. Day-Day said it looked like fire, and old Tallow nodded. In the heat of midsummer, lightning struck trees that burst into flames, or sometimes mounds of deep rotting wood kindled all by themselves. White settlers, would-be farmers, also started fires to clear fields or pastures. But the woods were so dry by the middle of the summer that even campfires weren't safe. Everything was dry tinder, ready to catch fire. The whole family had been extremely careful in putting out their fires as they moved through the woods. They approached this lake's far shore carefully, but at last they were in shallow water. As they drew their canoes closer to the opposite shore, where they would prepare to portage all their belongings to the next lake over, old Tallow suddenly signaled to them to hush. Her dogs were standing motionless in her canoe, hackles raised, staring at the screen of brush and trees just past the shoreline. The leaves were thick, and there was no doubt in old Tallow's mind that something, more likely someone, was concealed there. Whoever it was would have seen them approach for miles. Someone was waiting to ambush them. Once all of their canoes were ashore, they would be helpless on the wide expanse of sand. Instantly, everyone except old Tallow pushed back offshore and hunkered down in their canoes. Omakayas curled around Bijins, who seemed to understand something was wrong and went tense and silent, watchful too. Mama both steered and paddled as Dede pulled out his gun. Miss Gobines, Anamikins, Fishtail, and even Quill took out their bows and fitted arrows instantly into their hands. Old Tallow motioned to them that she was going to go ashore first. She had her gun loaded and her spear at her side. She got out of the canoe and crept onto the sandy shore, her dogs in a circle around her. Suddenly, the gray female, always the boldest, bounded forward and disappeared into the brush. Old Tallow crouched down, ready for an attack, but instead of an impressive blonde warrior, a young Chimukaman stumbled onto the sand with the gray dog holding tight to the leg of his breeches. "Call him off, please!" the boy shouted. "We're lost! Help us!" Old Tallow, who did not understand English, kept her gun trained on the boy. Dede knew what he was saying and told Mama to bring the canoe close enough to shore for him to land. Dede got out of the canoe holding his gun and waded over to stand next to Old Tallow. "Tell all of your people to come out of hiding," said Dede in English to the skinny little boy, who wore dirty, tattered clothing and was no more than 6 or 7 winters old. "We will not harm you." The boy's blackened face trembled as he tried to hold back his emotions. "There's only my little sister," he said. He turned and whistled sweetly as a bird and called, "Susan!" A tiny little girl toddled out of the leaves. She wore a halo of soft red hair, just like her brother, but she was so young that she had just begun to walk. Her face was also dark with dirt, and she gazed at everyone soberly as she sucked on her hand. "Your mother, your father, your family?" asked Dede. The boy turned away, hiding his face. He told Dede that he and his little sister had come to the lake where at least they could find water. For a long time, said the boy, they had nothing to eat but a young robin, which the boy was proud to have caught, and a few turtle eggs they had dug out of the sand. "Ho-wah," said Old Tallow, patting the boy's shoulder when Dede told her about the turtle eggs and the robin. "You are a mighty hunter. You provided for your little sister." Dede asked the little boy where their parents were. He offered to find them, but the boy shook his head and slumped down suddenly on his knees. The memory was too much for him. He said that he and his little sister had been sleeping on the floor of their cabin and awakened one morning to find it full of smoke. Emma, can you sit up, please? Thank you. "We tried to wake our mother and father," he said, "but they would not move." The parents had been sleeping higher up on a platform. The smoke had risen and collected all around them, but the floor was clear. The 2 children had stayed by their mother and father, trying to wake them until the fire became so hot and the smoke so thick that they'd had to flee. Old Tallow knelt down near the boy and continued to pat his sharp, trembling shoulders. The little girl stared at them all with round blue eyes as her brother went on talking. It didn't look like they'd been on their own for more than a couple days. They were skinny, but their bones weren't showing yet. They were covered with bug bites and sores. From the looks of the sky, the fire was still burning and had come closer. They could now smell the sharp smoke on the wind. Nokomis waded to shore with a bag of the pounded venison and berries that Omakayas had made. She opened the bag and gestured to the boy and the little girl, then pretended to eat. "It is good," said Dede. "Pemmican, eat it." The boy reached in first and took a handful. He ate the good pemmican as slowly as he could, but he was clearly famished. And soon he and his little sister began to wolf the food down, handful after handful, eyeing Nokomis to assess the moment she would close the mouth of the sack. But slowly and gently, she lowered the sack to the ground and made its opening wider. Old Tallow was already busy making a little cooking fire, and she had sent Anamikins and his father, along with Quill, away with the dogs to investigate the woods and make sure they were safe. "Bring back a waboose, or a fat squirrel," she had ordered. "Let's feed them up and then go looking for their family." It seems like their family's dead, doesn't it? Okay, we're reading this section now titled Night on Fire. They wouldn't have a chance to find the children's family for days, however, because suddenly the wind changed direction. Smoke billowed up over the trees. A black veil covered the sun, and the air grew thick with falling ash. Everyone scrambled back into the 3 canoes. The lost children both got in with Nokomis, Fishtail, and Angeline. Old Tallow and her dogs took Anamikins and Miskobines in their canoe. Dede, Mama, Quill, Omakayas, and Bijins piled into their canoe, and the whole family paddled out onto the lake, just past the reach of smoke. From there, as the sun set, casting a stark radiance through the smoke and the flames, they watched the woods burn steadily toward them. I think that's a really striking picture. If you look in your book, you'll see the picture there of them looking at the fire burning as they sit in their canoes. Yeah. It seemed like the whole night was on fire. Hot winds from shore sickened everyone, and the smoke hung down in a choking mass. The grown-ups took turns laying down in the bottoms of the canoes, but they were cramped and could not stretch out. Quill, whose porcupine coughed on top of his head, slept sitting up with his arms folded for a while, then slowly wedged himself into the front of the canoe. It was better for Omakayas and Bijins, who lay in the bottom and breathed cooler air. Dede and Old Tallow roped each canoe to the next one and made a small flotilla. The waves were calm enough so that there was no danger of capsizing, and with 1 or 2 of the grown-ups keeping watch, they drifted around in the middle of the lake. Halfway through the night, with everyone awake, the family gave up sleeping and began to talk. The presence of the pitiful settler's children had reminded Dede of something he had rarely mentioned. Are you listening, Sophia? His father had been a trader, his mother of the Anishinaabe people. He gazed at the children in Fishtail's canoe and at one point shook his head and said, "I feel very sad for these lost ones. I was lucky my mother's people adopted me, and my uncle became my father and loved me as a father does. My own father, who was mostly white like these children, did not love me." "Did you ever know your father?" asked Quill. This was a question that nobody else would have dared ask, for the very mention, quiet please, of Dede's father had in the past caused his brows to lower, his eyes to flash. But this was a special night, a night they had to endure together, and so Dede answered this question for the very first time. "Giggit," said Dede. "I met my father once, and I never cared to meet him again." Quill was quiet, and his porcupine slept peacefully. Everyone else would have left off with the subject, but not Quill. "Dede," he said, "will you tell me about meeting your father?" Now Dede's eyes did flash and harden. The fire glinted across his face. "I will tell you," he said, in a soft and somehow dangerous voice. "And then you will know why I loved my mother and my uncle, when my grandmother speaks to me in my dreams, and why I do not trust the white people. Here is how it happened." Then Dede told how all his life his mother had prepared him to meet his father by teaching him what little French she knew. She told him that his father was a rich and important man and that he had loved her. She told him that his father would love his son because he had loved her so greatly. His father had gone away into the country but would return, she said. When this great man did return, she taught his son to be ready. Dede's mother taught him how to behave like a white person. How to bow, how to shake hands, how to look at people's eyes, how to show his teeth in a bold, strange smile. She and her father taught him how to play chess, which he liked very much. She also taught him the words to say when he met his father. "Vous êtes mon père." You are my father. He repeated the words, learned them, and looked forward to the proud day when he would walk up to his father and announce himself. He pictured his father bending down then and taking him into his arms. But it did not happen that way, Dede said. The day did come. When Dede was 10 years old, his mother learned that the rich trader who had loved her and was journeying toward a fort 100 miles north. Dede and his mother walked those 100 miles. When they reached the fort, they were allowed to enter. The great man was in the central compound, smoking after a meal with his friends. Dede's mother begged that her son could be allowed to enter the house, and one of the voyageurs took Dede to the entrance. He knocked on the door and was invited to enter. When he was standing in the room, 5 men by the fire turned to look at him. They were all surprised to see the boy, who looked them over, all proudly, one by one. Suddenly, said Dede, he knew who his father was. He walked straight up to the most powerful man in the room. The man was the one the others deferred to, the one seated in the middle. Dede said that he held out his hand to shake that man's hand. Then he smiled. His heart was open. Dede said he did exactly what his mother had told him to do. Vous êtes mon père, he said. The well-dressed man reared back, looked at the other men, then opened his mouth and began to laugh. The other men looked astounded, but also sly, and they soon began to laugh too. Their laughter soared, grew hysterical. They slapped their thighs, wept at the absurdity. Their laughter carried them away. I walked out of that place, said Dede, and back to my mother. And that was the only time I saw my father. Everyone was silent after Dede finished speaking. And then Quill said in a way that impressed Demachios as very grown-up, kind, and unlike the Quill she knew, Dede, I'm glad you left that man and went with your mother, for I am proud to be your son and proud to be Anishinaabe. Okay, and we're going to stop it there partway through the chapter.